Here's another bar chart. What would be a good introduction for this? Use the 5 pieces of information to write an introduction. Remember the 5 pieces of information? Kind of graph, information on the vertical axis, the question or the title, the horizontal axis, and the key. So let's write one together. The bar chart gives information about the percentage of people in 4 different age groups who used the internet in Leland between 1998 and 2000. So that uses all the 5 points. Now what do? We need to change paragraphs for the elephant sentence. What is the elephant in this bar chart? Well, standing back and looking at it, I can see the 2 middle bars were very high. They were much higher than the 2 lower bars. So when I come close, I can see that those 2 represent the people between 16 to 30 years old and 31 to 50 years old. So a good elephant sentence would be, the first thing to note is that the people in the 2 middle age groups had by far the highest internet use in Leland over the period under study. So that is my introduction and elephant sentence finished. Now we go to the main body. How do we introduce the main body? You remember? We begin with more specifically. And remember, all of this language is on your useful language page. So we begin with the highest bar, which is this one here. It belongs to the people between 16 to 30 years old. So we begin more specifically. In 1998, 53% of all the people who used the internet were aged between 16 to 30. And then we go down to 2000. 2 years later, this figure fell significantly to 44%. So we've finished talking about the 16 to 30-year-olds. Now we should go to the second highest age group, which is the 31 to 50-year-olds. So we begin. We need a linking word, again from our useful language page. Internet use in the 31 to 50-year-olds stood at 41% at the beginning of the period and fell minimally to 37% by 2000. So now we've finished talking about the 2 middle age groups which had the highest internet use. We have to talk about the youngest and the oldest age group. So we begin. We need a linking word. Here we can see the trend is upward. So I'm going to begin with in contrast. And I'm going to put these 2 age groups together now because they both had an upward trend and they were both small. So they're very similar. So look how I do it. As regards internet use in the youngest and oldest age groups, it rose from 2% to 9% and 4% to 10% respectively over the 2-year period. So now I've finished giving all the data for all the age groups. So I need a conclusion. From the given data, it is obvious that internet use fell in the middle age groups, but rose in the youngest and oldest age groups in Leland over the aforementioned period. Let's look at this complete summary of the bar chart. Here it is here. So you can study that again. You can see it follows the structure for tea and coffee. So study this and be ready to describe a graph with a trend. Here's another diagram. This time it's a table. Does it show a trend? Well, yes, it does. It shows the number of UK people who went abroad from 1994 to 1998. So it is a trend. How many different trends does it show? Well, it shows one for each purpose of visit. For holiday, for business, for visits to friends and relatives, other reason, and there's a total number of visits. Each of these follows a trend. So in order to summarize the main trends, I train my students to make a small line graph to illustrate each trend. This is what they should look like. Now it's easy to follow the main trend and to summarize the changes. Look at the total number of visits abroad. Look at that. It began here, it dipped, and then it went up. Holiday reasons followed the same trend. Business reasons rose minimally. Friends to relatives, again a general upward trend, and visits abroad for other reasons fluctuated mildly. So let's think about the introduction for this table. Using the information we have, we can begin. The table gives a breakdown of how many UK residents went abroad from 1994 to 1998 and the purpose of their visit. So that is an introduction for this table. Now, what would be a good elephant for this table? Well, when you look at the numbers here, you can see that there's much higher numbers for visits abroad for a holiday. So that would be the elephant, wouldn't it? So we can say that. The first thing to note is that the most popular reason for going abroad for UK residents was for a holiday over the period under study. And now you would take each purpose of visit separately and describe it using all the data. And remember to summarize. So try this and then check the model answer in the ebook.